Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second part of Milton Keynes Litfest's celebration of the Grist Books anthology, We're All in It Together, Poems for a Disunited Kingdom, in which we gathered over 20 of the poets who contributed to read and introduce their work online. Some of those who took part weren't available to read live on the night, but kindly provided pre-recorded videos. Of those of you who attended Part 2 will be aware, technical remnants prevented us from playing these elements as part of the event. One of the benefits of Zoom recordings, however, is that we've been able to edit the video file to introduce and include these readings as you would have heard and seen them had the techno gods been with us. The evening started with an introduction and reading by Steve Ely, one of the editorial team for the anthology. Steve is a poet and novelist. He teaches creative writing at the University of Huddersfield, where he's also director of the Ted Hughes Network. His most recent books are Lectio Violent and The European Eel. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Eden.
Yeah, okay. I'll just talk very briefly about the origin of this book, and the credit, the original credit for this needs to go to my former colleague Simon Crump, the kind of novelist and artist, who was one of the leaders of the Sheffield tree protest, which saved 17,000 Sheffield street trees by means of non-violent direct action. Simon's got a book out called Persons Unknown, The Battle for Sheffield's Street Trees, which he brought out with his co-protester Calvin Payne. Out of that came a concept from Simon to bring out two books. The first one was called Trouble, an anthology of political prose, and the second projected one was called Strife, a volume of political and protest poetry. But what happened was Simon had to leave the university, basically. He was made redundant, and the process went into abeyance. It was resurrected by Michael Stewart, who's done by far the largest amount of work on this book. But he didn't enlist myself and Kayleigh Campbell with him. Kayleigh was doing a PhD in creative writing with me at the time. So the new concept, then, we developed the concept of strife, which was kind of generic political poetry, into a kind of an exploration of the state of the nation. And we decided to use the context of the disingenuous Tory, we're all in it together slogan that was first developed by George Osborne in order to provide a kind of bogus sense of solidarity in the context of the austerity that the Tories have inflicted on the country for 12 years. What we wanted to do was to publish established poets with an open commission, hopefully hoping that we'd get a wide range of people opting in. So we commissioned Ian Duhigg, MacGillivray, Jerry Cambridge, Peter Mackay, Rory Waterman, Joel Taylor, Suna Afshan, and 15 in total, I think, in there. We got over 400 submissions over 400 submissions from a range of established and new voices. We were very, very pleased that lots of established poets who we could have easily commissioned actually submitted. And I think we've got a really good book, a diverse and provocative book full of good poetry, and which, as we say, throws a few grenades. It's a bit of a wind-up in there. We're going to hear about a dozen poems from the anthology in this event, starting with mine, and I'll get onto mine very shortly. But before we do that, I just want to thank people, because I'm usually useless at thanking people. So I'd like to thank Dave and the Milton Keynes Literature Festival for programming two We're All in It Together events. My former colleague Simon Crump, who started this whole project and to whom the book is dedicated. Michael Stewart, who led the project, secured the funding for it, and MacAoidh to Kayleigh Campbell, and a huge student team, especially Sam Higson-Blythe. The poets who read Monday and who will read today, everyone who submitted to the competition, successful and unsuccessful, the commissioned poets, and everybody who's turned up tonight. So without further ado, I'll get on to my poem. I'll give you a brief introduction. So my poem's on page 70 of the book. It's called Commissioners of Sewers. So the poem is taken from a work in progress, which is called Ely, E-E-L-Y, which is an extensive section on the 17th century drainage of the English fenlands. So the commissioners of sewers were quangos appointed from the ranks of landowners, politicians and bureaucrats to oversee and force through the drainage and enclosure of the fens, which is one of the greatest crimes against the Commonwealth in English and British history, a social, cultural and ecological disaster, and an act of kind of ruthless internal imperialism with affinities to the Highland clearances and to the expropriation and ethnic cleansing perpetrated by the English imperial state in Ireland and throughout its empire. Thoroughly venal and corrupt, the commissioners had many affinities with the current Tory cabal, which is one reason why I chose to submit the poem to the anthology. The other reason is that it actually contains the phrase, "We're all in it together." Commissioners of Suez. This poem describes how the Crown, aided and abetted by sundry lords, courtiers and adventurers, used prerogative power and the state's monopoly of violence to drain and enclose the Fenland Commons, extort, expropriate and expel the commoners, and auction off the Commonwealth to privy investors. The Commissioners of Suez would conspire with landowners and adventurers to declare a given tract of fenland hurtfully surrounded, contrary to efficiency and the national good. The commissioners would then lay a tax on the relevant parishes to cover the cost of the drainage, whether the parishioners wanted the land drained or not. They invariably did not, because their livelihoods were dependent on their commoners' rights to exploit the fenland's bounty, and in paying for its drainage, they'd be funding their own ruin. After the commoners refused or failed to pay the tax, the commissioners would then impose the works, which were undertaken by the landowners and adventurers, often with the active support of the king. Drainage and enclosure would follow, with the commoners' rights being unilaterally withdrawn and the plot sold off to Dutch and Huguenot settlers, whose loyalty to their landlords, the drainage and the Protestant crown might be assured. The commoners' protests were put down with the full force of the state. Militia and vigilante groups were loosed on the enemy within. Dissidents were murdered, assaulted, imprisoned. Ringleaders were brought before the Star Chamber and subject to astronomical, unpayable fines, equivalent to millions in current exchange value, resulting in committal to the fleet for non-payment of tax and fine, unless, of course, they signed affidavits renouncing their rights and consenting to the drainage, at which point tax and fine would be waived and the fettered might be released, to labour on the settlers' farms or to leave their lands forever. Thus, the drainage of the fens, generally characterised as a glorious feat of British engineering that transformed unproductive, uninhabited and pestilential waste into habitable, rich and fertile farmland, able to feed the growing population of a go-getting nation on the rise, that is, as the perfect form of nationalist, capitalist, we're all in it together progress, was in fact a ruthless act of imperial violence, ethnic cleansing and colonial plantation, not different in kind to similar English or British atrocities in the Americas, Australasia, Africa, Ireland and Scotland. See also enclosure movement, The Scotch king, man of blood and pleonexic grasper Charles Stewart was the primary instigator of this action against his subjects, but the following stuffed their faces at the trough. Francis Russell, percentage man, fence sitter, Earl of Bedford. St. Corny Vermoiden, gambler, undertaker, Ponzi fraudster. Sir Miles Sandys, parvenu, ring sniffer, addled parliamentarian. Sir Thomas Lovell, lumper, scrumper, porthole pumper. Sir Philibert Vernati, a Dutchman, gentleman of the king's bedchamber. Sir Jacob Katz, double Dutch, knighted by the king on account of coin, adventurer and man of letters, more renowned than red. Sir Robert Heath, pro forma used car ducker and diver, archer, Farage, Johnson. Sir Edward Heron, bent copper, delinquent, gangster. Sir Anthony Thomas, swindler, debtor, man of mean estate. Robert Killigrew, privy this, I dub thee that, farmer of corners and guaranteed profit. And his son, Sir William, vast gainer, member of Parliament, poet. Dissociation of sensibility in the dried peats of the coffee house, the emergence of the poetry voice in the Restoration Court. Elicute murderers, slavers and scammers up for the forward prize. The poem is over. There will be a test.
Thank you, Steve. Our first pre-recorded video contributor on the evening was Ben Banyard. Ben lives in Portishead on the Severn Estuary near Bristol. His third collection of poetry, High Viz, was published by Yaffle Press in 2021. Ben edits Black Noir Review and blogs at benbanyard.wordpress.com.
Hi there, my name's Ben Banyard. I'm a poet who lives in Portishead, just outside Bristol on the Severn Estuary. I'm so happy to be in this excellent anthology. So, thanks so much to Michael, Steve and Kaylee for including my poem in there. And also to Dave for organising these readings. It's a great opportunity to share our work. I'm sorry I'm not able to read it live to you, but hopefully this is the next best thing. My poem, Scottish Tenor, came about just like a lot of my poems, something completely innocuous, looking in my wallet and finding that I had a Scottish £10 note in there. And in England, you kind of get that trepidation about having that. You shouldn't have to because it's legal tender. But then I saw the call for poems for this anthology and thought that it was a perfect analogy. And it's not the Brexit thing. I thought they're going to be bombarded by Brexit poems. And so I just thought I'd send them this one, and very happily they accepted it. So without further ado, I'll read Scottish Tenor. It's strange to have cash these days. The notes crackle in my wallet, poke above receipts and loyalty cards. One of them is a Clydesdale tenner. Legal tender south of the border, never you mind. But I see doubt flicker across the assistant's face. She eyes Robbie Burns with suspicion, flips it over to the view of Edinburgh as though looking for instructions. I dare her. Is there a problem? She glances back at me, shakes her head, presses a few buttons on the till, and gets my change. I see my note has a little compartment all to itself. Have a nice day, she smiles. Thanks for listening.
Our second live reader on the night was Bob Beagrie. Bob lives in Middlesbrough and has published numerous collections of poetry and several pamphlets. Most recently, When We Wake, We Think We're Whales from Eden, Stairwell Books, 2021. And Then We Saw the Daughter of the Minotaur, published by the Blacklight Engine Press, 2020. And Civil Insolences, published by Smack Stag in 2019.
So I have two poems in this very beautiful looking book, and I'm very proud to have these poems in amongst such good company. My first poem is called The Dreaming. The people are plummeting from the edge of the cliffs, men, women, children. Many have closed their eyes to the drop, to the waves below, manhandling rocks. But one young fella holds tight to the peak of his cap while yelling, I'm gonna ride my very own unicorn. You gotta give his commitment credit. Another bloke's saluting the sky, bellowing, rule Britannia. A girl flaps her arms, willing a sudden metamorphosis into a kittiwake. Some are yanking off their clothes mid-fall, streamlining themselves into herring, plaice or sand eels, fingers clawing at their necks to quickly fashion gills. Some are waving resolutely in their backward descent at our snowflake hesitation at the land's crumbling lip. Watching ropes they've tied around our stalks uncoil. We too shall become fish, bird, seal, crab, and horsefly first. Like the firm believers we inadvertently follow, we must let go of our familiar lives and embrace this fall. My second poem in the book is called Pathogen. This was published in Civil Insolences. Came out in 2019 by Smokestack Books. It's all about, it focuses on the Battle of Gisborne. The whole book is about the Battle of Gisborne in 1643, part of British Civil Wars. But I'm using lots of the events of the time to look at to examine the social divisions and political divisions and social fragmentation within our own time. Anyway, it starts off with two quotes. And the first one is from, it's a parliamentary motto from the Great Eclipse of the Sun, 1644, that goes, "Thy subjects' blood with fire and sword cries vengeance, Lord." And the second one is from Dr. Martin Luther King. "Hate begets hate, violence begets violence, toughness begets a greater toughness." Pathogen. Like someone forgot to turn the key, shoot the bolt, guard the cage door. Now it's loose, running wild, raging on pent-up retribution for its incarceration. Not hiding in the undergrowth or a hole in the ground, but behind a look, beneath a word, within a promise, traveling in a crowd, forming clusters along chains of transmission. Hitchhiking on breath and bodily fluids, a stowaway in an attitude, an illegal immigrant riding the virulent fear of itself gone viral, breaking out in a swelling of symptoms, the sharpened accusations of susceptibles, slammed doors, raised voices, dog shit through the letterbox, broken windows, burning homes, a contagion of tears, smoking guns, targeted spot checks, roundups, stretched necks, tightening nooses, spreading its invisible infection from host to vulnerable host through mounted charges, routes, panicked retreats, infiltrating the blood, penetrating the lymph node, concealed there, trafficking pathways of incubation through dendritic and monocyte cells, the brain's blockage breached, the heart besieged, kinship ties in tatters, trust, polluted keepsake, corrupting all it touches, draining its juices, piled high with cadavers. Bring out your dead, bring out your dead, bring out your dead. Thank you very much.
Allow me to introduce the next poet this evening, which is Georgia Hilton. The intro here. Georgia is an Irish poet and fiction writer, now living in Winchester. Her work has appeared in magazines such as The Rialto, Kroll Magazine, 192 Magazine, and Per Happened. Georgia is the author of 2 books of poetry, both published by Dempsey and Windle. She's married with 3 children, and you can find her on Twitter at @GGeorgiaHilton. Georgia, welcome to MK Lit Fest.
Thanks very much. I'm not going to do a mega introduction to my poem, which you'll find on page 54, because it's sort of explanatory in the title, really. But I just wanted to say thank you for including me. I was absolutely thrilled to have a poem in this anthology. I thought it looked a fascinating project from the moment I saw it. So I was I was over the moon to have a poem included. So thank you. This is "O England, I Love You." O England, I love you, but I do not understand you. You're the aging parent with a chronic anger problem, the one we worry about, placing obstacles in your own way, then cursing the neighbours when you trip over them. I don't think you're okay. You're the boomer embracing Zoom, but fallen into the black hole of internet conspiracy theories. You're doomed to relive the war in glorious technicolor, even though you're too young to remember it. You say it was your finest hour. Meanwhile, you let the scammers in. They put their feet up on your coffee table, drink tea from your best porcelain, then invite their friends over, those flattering rogues who tell you you can have your youth again. They smile at you, eat your shortbread, steal your grandkids' inheritance, scratch the paintwork on their way out. You think, what nice boys they are, because they speak well, went to private schools, remind you of a time when everything made sense.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you. Next reading for us this evening is Jennifer Johnson. Jennifer was born in Sudan, spent part of her childhood in Ghana, and later worked as a VSO agriculturalist in Zambia. Widely published in magazines, most recently in Stand and Anthologies. Her work includes Footprints on Africa and Beyond, Hearing Eye 2006, and Hidden and Shadows, Metal Press 2017. Welcome to Litfest, Jennifer.
I'm on now, am I? Yes, okay. Yes, I was born in the Sudan in 1956, and we had to leave in 1960 because of some trouble there. And it struck me over the years that you know, we had a very easy journey to this country compared to many people who've had, you know, come to this country since. And that was the inspiration for this poem, Passages. And I was also thrilled to have two poems chosen for this anthology. So this is Passages. In this coastal town, poverty protects itself with flags and dogs. Visitors climb to the fort that guarded against strangers for millennia, look down on ferries that feed this port. Underneath the castle lies chalk of the sort teachers taught and frightened me with. Rock worm-eaten by defensive passages, carved out in countless wars. These chalk tunnels dig into my memory, my childhood obscured by Sudanese sandstorms. A plane simply flew my family into clearer weather, first to Malta, then London. Are those headscarfed women sitting on the bench tourists, or have they made one of those epic journeys you see on the news, crossing shifting sand dunes, Mediterranean waves? The women put on dark coats, cover their bright clothes. And the other poem that I have in the anthology is very different in tone. There seems to be a great divide between those who like books and the majority, of course, who don't. And that majority seems to be even bigger if you consider the people who don't like poets very much. And I wrote this poem from the point of view of somebody who doesn't like poets, and it's called Keep Out the Poets. There's too many here already. They frighten me because of how they stick together. They don't even try to act normal. They use words I can't understand just to put me down. If you go to where they live, it's disgusting, full of dusty books. You can't breathe for all the dust. That's another reason I don't like them. They've got time to read, but of course most of them don't do a proper job like me. Once there was this woman at the place where I worked. She seemed okay, but I found out she was a poet. That's how they're taking over, changing our culture. You hear their artist stuff at weddings and funerals, like How We Talk's no good. My daughter has to read poems at school. They're so miserable. What we need is cheering up. You'd think with their education, they'd make themselves look smart, but they go around looking like students. That's why I don't want any more living where I do. Thank you.
Jennifer, you have us rumbled. I plead guilty. Thankfully, you can't see the rest of this kitchen, so you don't have evidence of my appalling incompetence at housework. Thank you very much. Our next poet this evening is MacGillivray, also known as Kirsten Norrie. MacGillivray is the author of 3 poetry collections: The Last Wolf of Scotland, published by Red Hen Press, The Nine of Diamonds, Sir Royal Mordantless, and The Gaelic Garden of the Dead, both by Bloodaxe Books. Her 4th book, Ravage, An Astonishment of Fire, will be published by Bloodaxe in 2023. Welcome to Litfest, MacGillivray, and please read for us.
Thank you. Fiskarmais Mission MacGillivray. Good evening. My name is MacGillivray, or rather my pseudonym is MacGillivray, although I have of late been working with yet another pseudonym under whose name I submitted and was slightly terrified to be accepted for this anthology. He's called Christian Norge. He's Shetlandic Norwegian, born in 1930 exists precariously under great duress on the fictitious island of Doon, and has become very much convinced that he's a demon. And so under these circumstances, because he was floating in my ether, as it were, he seemed like a good spokesperson for the tangled embodiment of views illustrated here in this wonderful volume, which, by the way, we stock in the Woodstock bookshop just outside Oxford if anybody's passing through and would like to buy one. And so for me, notions of nationhood and islandhood and estrangement, boundaries, inner and outer voices, the voices of politics, which have reached rather a shrill bent over the last 3 to 4 years, shall we say, if not longer, as seen in the video at the beginning. Interesting to see the miners there. All came to me in a flash as this rather difficult place of existence, this demonic estrangement from self and from other, but also those lines that are courted within socio-political conditions now. And there's been touched on earlier, great grief stirred up, I think, through the media and otherwise. And even now tonight, speaking with you all on Zoom, where yet again, boxes in this interminable system that we seem to be in. So, which is good and bad, I suppose. So it's a great honor to be here, and interesting to note the cross-germinations between, for example, the Technicolor that was mentioned by you, Georgia, and the Stewart legacy by Steve. So without further ado, I shall start. By 1961, poet Christian Norrie became convinced that he was in fact a demon, and subsistence on the Hebridean island of Doon had become an increasing strain for Norrie, who felt his exiled status intensively. In response to both this isolation and the sudden revelation of his demonhood, Norrie embarked on creating an amnesiac system, convinced that if he could forget himself, then redemption might follow. Enormously flawed, the system has only been recovered in fragments, scratched out in notes and excerpts of lines that sometimes constitute poems, but more often comprise conflicted jottings. Apparently, Norgay's conviction that Doon contained a thin skin or portal through which he had been washed up lent weight to the idea that Doon was indeed attracting the malignant Slúch na Marv, or wind of voices, that apparently dictated these verses to him. The earliest emotion of worship singed on this, my sea of thirst. And I am not equipped, genus of water, genus of salt, to climb the tree, the spreet bower submersed. Cannot yet be committed to paint, nor carved, nor versed. So kneel here still, with my tongue in my hand and pant. The spit in my eye has not yet dispersed. In its phlegm lens found lifeless, I was crouched in my boat, snouted in sleep. An eradication of dream blew into storm, static yet quivering on the horizon of kelp. My tongue, still blistering, is a cracked curse between dumbness and speech. The sand flood my mouth, the binder my mouth. Work grows in its tomb like a blight. I have seen my statue bitten out as the fisher coals glow in extinguishment. Marginal I cope, time, my aging catapult, I restore with stones, planets of hope. My corpse swallows one, stern glass eye of the throat. Stern eye of the figurehead, of marine beast residing there, color flooded with fear. Washed up here is monochrome. It is not season, it is not burnish. It is neutered in color hope. I have stirred its bewilderment, tang of titanium, tang of lamp. The color escapes hue, unilluminate bleeding, and its bandages the beach, stained by the ceaseless, pressing, colorless sea, are stained by time, not temperament, not reflection, not spectrum. I acquire the taste of monochrome season. sit on salt licks to lick and weep, perch and in soaked plenitude spreet, seethed in and out on blenched colourways of sleep. It is perishment, says colour, enmeshed in a vision of sight, whose reflex of fire is air, whose beach rolled up tight as a parable shore, is a demon beached in circumstance of light. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sitting listening, and much as I was on Monday, I'm hugely struck by the sheer diversity and richness and variety of the poems in this anthology. I guess we'll probably prove the point again as I welcome our next poet this evening, who is Mark Connors. Fine intro. Mark is a poet, novelist, and creative writing tutor from Leeds. His third poetry collection, After, is out now through Yaffle Press. He's currently hard at work on his third novel and a hybrid book of prose and poetry called 2022. For more information, visit markconnors.co.uk or find him on Twitter as @MarkEConnors2, all one word. Mark, welcome. Please read for us.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, it's great to be here. Grist has been around for as long as I've been in poetry. I've always put it in a place and it's within its pages, and thankfully this time I was lucky. Bit of an institution in Yorkshire, I think, a bit of a sort of cult following among anthologies. For my poem, I wanted to deal with the sort of racism from people who really don't mean to be racist, but just can't quite help themselves. You find them a lot in suburban Britain, I think, and even when they can be the nicest people in the sort of areas you live in, but they're always one that always say the wrong thing and say things like, "Well, I've got a black friend," things like that. So this is for those people, and it's called Welcome to the Neighbourhood. Hi, just thought I'd pop over to invite you to ours. We're having people over Friday. You in? Brilliant. How's the unpacking going? Have you met your neighbours yet? Trish at number 7's great. She runs a hair salon, Hair Flick, next to the deli. If you decide to colour your hair, don't look any further. The woman by the pub made me look like Keith Lemon. Do you talk shop? I know what you teach are like. If so, I'll stick you on the end with Sam and Alice from the high school. She's due in late February. And then there's Tommy. He's tastier than a free-range egg and he's got a right yolk on him. Lovely man, divorced, just saying, sporty type, likes to run and hike. I wouldn't kick him out of our king size. Then there's Marcus and Sally. They own loads of property but do loads of work for charity. I'm doing tapas. You'll love it. No one sees colour on our street.
Thank you, Mark. The words of lack of self-awareness in contemporary Britain. Our next poet reading for us tonight is Matt Hill. After attending Michael Stewart's Invisible Writers Group in 2017, Matt collaborated on Leeds Literary Festival's 2019's Tweeting a Tale for Found Fiction. The same year, he had Losing Control published in Trouble, Grist Anthology of Protest Short Stories. Safety First, which he's going to read for us tonight, is Matt's first published poem. Matt, welcome.
Thanks very much, Dave.
You're welcome.
This is just a short one. I hope your attention will be rewarded. Safety First. In your box, buried deep, enduring life's common terminal prognosis. Screen light and candlelight graze the sides. We helped you build this. You remain safe from disease, violence, change, sterile. The casket blackens, then burns as you hold the candle to it. Searing, burning, you haul soil-smeared blisters into daylight. You are scarred, open to infection, challenge, new perspectives, for better, for worse. But this could be living. Thank you.
Matt, as Steve said earlier, it's wonderful that this anthology includes not just many respected and widely published writers, but new writers and people coming to poetry for the first published time, like Matt. Somebody with more of a publication record behind them is our next reader tonight, William Thirsk-Gaskill. William was born in Leeds in 1967. Him and his wife Valerie appeared in a joint performance at Wakefield Litfest 2017 called Welcome to the Mad. William's adaptation of his Grist novella Escape Kit was broadcast by BBC Radio 4 in 2019, and his collections of poetry and short fiction are available from stairwellbooks.co.uk. Welcome to Litfest, Matt. Please read for us.
You mean William?
Sorry,
right.
William, welcome.
Brief topical introduction. Further to events of today, I'm feeling in a strange state of mind at the moment because I went to the same school as Liz Truss. So I dedicate this reading to Mr. Rothbury, my careers teacher, who explained what the ruling class is pleased to refer to as the flexible labour market 20 years before anybody writing in the newspapers. This poem is called On This Occasion. I applied for a job on Monday. I had to check a box that said I was eligible to work in the United Kingdom. I applied for 2 jobs on Tuesday. I had to check a box that said I had experience of working with the General Data Protection Regulation and provide a scanned copy of my driving licence. I applied for 3 jobs on Wednesday. I had to check a box that said neither I nor any member of my family was currently employed by the civil service, provide a scanned copy of my passport, and compose a 5-minute presentation on the life cycle of fleas. I applied for 4 jobs on Thursday. I had to check a box that said I had experience of managing annual budgets over £50,000 in value, provide scanned copies of all my examination certificates, compose a 10-minute presentation on the South Sea bubble, and give an undertaking that I was willing to commute to Birkenhead 5 days a week. I applied for 5 jobs on Friday. I had to check a box which said that I had no unspent criminal convictions, outstanding county court judgments, and was willing to undergo a full disclosure search for my criminal record, provide scanned copies of my parents' birth certificates, compose a 15-minute presentation on the life of Andy Warhol, give an undertaking that I was willing to commute to Folkestone 6 days a week, and undergo a full medical. I applied for 6 jobs on Saturday. I had to check a box which said that I'd never lied, stolen, nor made anyone cry, provide a scanned copy of everything I was thinking at that moment, compose a 20-minute presentation that would make every member of the audience enjoy every presentation they would ever experience again as long as they lived, give an undertaking that I was willing to commute to Murmansk 7 days a week, undergo interrogation under conditions of complete sensory deprivation, and agree to go back in time and attempt to assassinate Hitler. I slept in on Sunday, read a book, watched a film. On Monday, I was summoned to the job centre to hear a lecture on the importance of undertaking job-seeking activities every day. They terminated my claim. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I was thinking while you were reading that, I don't know if any of you know, there's a gentleman called Graham Hughes, who's a broadcaster and presenter and activist. He's been one of the main driving forces of helping Ukrainians to come to Britain. And has been regularly driving to Ukraine to actually transport people. there was a family, a mother and 3 small children and a puppy. And the children would be devastated to leave the puppy behind. So I was okay, we'll do the paperwork, we'll get all that sorted. He drove from Liverpool to Ukraine and coming back with the family. Acres of paperwork for the family was all okay. I think he said 217 pages of paperwork he had to complete for the dog, and there was an error on 1 page. So the dog got stuck in France for a fortnight while he came back to England with the family, completed all the paperwork again, and then drove all the way back to France to collect the dog and bring it back in. So yeah, we think we're satirizing something that seems to be passing beyond any hope of meaningful satire. Another of the poets joining us by video was Penny Blackburn. Penny lives in the northeast of England, but is originally from Yorkshire. Her poetry has been published by, among others, Poetry Society News, Atrium, The Fair, Rigwelter, and Fly on the Wall. She has recently been commended in the Waltham Forest and Positive Images Festival competitions.
Hi, I'm Penny Blackburn, and I'd like to share my poem with you from the We're All in It Together anthology. My poem is called Crowds Will Gather on the Beach. The signal for your life to fall apart will be the smallest flicker of dread, as easy to miss as a trickle of smoke beneath the arcade's kaleidoscopic lights, its jangling rings and buzz, clattering penny cascades and rattling shoot-em-ups. Within an hour, the flames will caress everything. Fire crews will press hovercrafts into service. From the moment the call comes in, they know that nothing they can do will be sufficient. Your pavilion will buckle, glass fracture, paint return to liquid. Your decks will fall, planks sycamore winging their way into the dark space below. News footage will show the black sheet of smoke that chokes the shadows, watching, curious, from the sand. Dawn, you will be smouldering, ribbed ironwork still too hot for the gulls and starlings that wish to settle. Stripped to your silhouette struts, ashy layered over rust. You will wait for the tide to wash around you. You will plead with the sea to leave you what is left. The crowds will disperse, like the seabirds. They have their own lives to be flying along with. Thank you.
Another of the poets joining us by video was Peter Mackay. We were very privileged. Peter's poem appears in both English and Gaelic in the printed anthology, and Peter was kind enough to read the poem for us in both languages. Peter has 2 collections published by Mackay, Galore 2015 and Some Kind Of 2020. Originally from the Isle of Lewis, he now lives in Edinburgh.
Good evening to you all. Sorry I can't be with you. I'm in Spain at the moment, though. This here behind me is my flat in Edinburgh. Smishe Pàdraig Mackay. My name is Peter Mackay, and I'm originally from the Isle of Lewis in the northwest of Scotland. The poem I'm going to read is a response of sorts to Leaving Barra by the Northern Irish poet Louis MacNeice, who wrote it for his great mad travel book of the 1930s, I Crossed the Minch. I think it's fair to say that I'm interested in the idea of leaving Britain. I'm a great supporter of small European democracies, and I think that Scotland would be an excellent example of one of those. Fágal Vretin. Haisn rufi fágal in Illense, rai fatar behin. Yn bat y siŵl amach a lochbryn y pelican, mar I chain ysgedrych isgyn y stwre. Chanye archus a fawn y stwr sy'n o'r characsin, crycwch le dŵr biach corn cochi, na he rocach yn simpli y lentyn na he chestyn yn, agos gyda se ashling a hawn, sodys yn y tyn wrth lot yn ffigu, cha cheid y cholanach ymys cwlch yn falw sgyr yn ynnyfish, na cafon yn y pich gyda'r glanie. Hagach fachgal yn ys chwa trid hylyr I glanie, a chanil sy'n y gra gilydd ffyr y grai, as chynnyl taxi riain as an gŵl no sgil och rwy no or an ŵr. Fatar behen, y fewr orhir, crwbacyn am falloch yn sa far och ŵr rian an roar trys contrais ar siach loschglen, chachil sy'n chai gan elense. Leaving Britain. We have been leaving this island, my love, all our lives. The boat tacking out of Loch Broom, the porpoise like forgetfulness gild in our wake. We have no regrets propelling us from that rock, the stony insistence of its war memorials, the same simple answers to the same vapid questions. And though this is just a dream, a washy light pouring through wooden slats, it will never come to life in the empty nooks of business districts, pigeons pecking at the glass. Each word is now see-through as thin glass, but that doesn't mean they are true, my love. And there are no taxis to be got for love or pennies, read tales or re-sung songs. All our lives waiting on new frontiers. Crabs skulking in cold seaweed. Despite the ebb and flow of our seven-fold excuses, there's no returning to this island. Banyard. Many thanks to you all. Cheers.
First in-person reader this evening is actually me. I shall do the uncomfortable introducing yourself in third person routine and then read you my poem. Raised in South London, Dave has worked as a musician, university administrator, poetry librarian and editor in places across Europe. His writing has been shortlisted for the Manchester Fiction and Bath Short Story Awards and appeared in journals and anthologies in the UK and US. He lives in Buckinghamshire with his husband and far too many books, CDs and guitars. And the poem I'm going to read you is called Political Studies. Two poems that I submitted to the anthology are far from typical of what I normally write. I'm quite apart from the fact that I'm much more of a short story writer than a poet. These are much more political, satirical, sarcastic, and I was aware of echoes of Louis MacNeice's bagpipe music ricocheting around my head while they were written. These were sketched out on a little pocket notebook while I was doing the traditional lockdown stomp through the woods about a year ago. So this is political studies. Britannia's seizures have led to amnesia. She denies everything that she did. Her glamour and glory is turned out cheap and hoary. Now she'll flash you her tits for a quid. With the speed you can tell that we're straight off hell. These handcarts won't handle the bends. Their engines are stoked by privileged blokes who've auctioned their souls to their friends. And hey diddle diddle, they're all on the fiddle while our world goes arse over tit. Their position secure while we stand in manure. If now it grows in it, lad, call it shit. Watch them toast their campaigns with taxpayers' champagne while we burn our tables and chairs. No, they don't hate the judges, just give them wee nudges and then laugh as they fall down the stairs. See them run country miles to avoid public trials, so fret of their possible fate. The Beatles were wrong. Albion's favourite song is All You Need Is Hate. We're in with both feet, chowing down on whale meat, pretending we're smitten with gristle. They still tell us we're loved, but when push comes to shove, what they mean is bend over. Final word of the evening, I think, rightly belonged to Michael Stewart. Michael was the lead editor of the anthology and gave a sterling introduction to it in part one, which you can also see on our YouTube channel. Michael's debut novel, King Crow, was the winner of the Guardian's Not the Booker Award. Other books include Couples, Cafe Assassin, Mr. Jolly, and Ill Will, The Untold Story of Heathcliff. Walking the Invisible, a hybrid memoir about the Brontes' lives and landscapes, was published by HarperCollins in June 2021. Mike was also the creator of the Bronte Stones project, and you can read more about him and his work at michael-stewart.org.uk.
My name is Michael Stewart. I am one of the editors of this book. We're all in it together. Poems for a Disunited Kingdom. And I'm also the founder of Grist Books, who published this book. And I set Grist Books up in 2009, and we're still going. And this, our latest book, is a kind of State of the Nation collection. And I'm going to read from it because I'm also included in the book. I should say, first of all, apologies for not being here this evening. I'm double booked, but I'm certainly here in spirit. And this is a poem called No Dogs. My mother tells me this story. My mother, whose family are Irish, tells me a story of my grandfather coming over from Ireland as a young man and not being served in pubs in Salford, where they lived. And I think this poem is kind of inspired by that story, really. It's called No Dogs. Dog couldn't get served in the grain and hop. The barman pointed to a sign on the back bar. No dogs. He wanted to see the Renaissance watercolours exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum. The receptionist refused to print him a ticket. But he ducked the rope at the entrance. He skipped the miniatures of Anne of Cleves, went straight to the Jacob Jordians. When he tried to book for Gotterdammerung, the online system rejected his Amex card. The sommelier at the Dorchester said the wine was too complex for his palate. He was kicked out of Fortnum and Mason's by two goons in top hats and tails, even though he'd prepaid for the food dye hamper. He padded grey pavements, doors latched, hasped, boarded and hooked. Then the rain came down, lead shot fell from pewter clouds. Dog looked for shelter, every bar and every public house. No dogs, no dogs, no dogs, no dogs. His fur clung to his skin. Rain ran down the gutter of his nose. He shook his coat and shivered. He traipsed through North Parade, along the main road out of town. He hit the fields east of the city, the dust of his feet into the country. Dusk, frost, feet worn. Needed a roof over his head to rest his bones. Out on the edge of Tong Moor, a farmhouse glowed on a hill. Warm lights poured and puddled. A sclerotic farmer slammed the door. It was a big, fat, bald no. Found a kennel by a mistle, trudged to the mouth of its entrance, barred, bolted, barbed, razor-wired, topped by two combi locks, and a sign above the lintel. No fucking dogs.
Thank you, everybody, for reading and for listening and for being here this evening. It's been a pleasure to have you all, despite the technical difficulties that we had along the way. I think we should all unmute ourselves and give everybody a round of applause.
Thanks.